Welcome to the Highland Park Bros podcast. I'm your host, Terrence, and with me is my co-host, Jason, calling in for the Batcave in Indianapolis. Jason, how are you, my good man?
Hey, man, I'm doing good. You know what it is? It's another lovely week. Kicking it off with another session of the Highland Park Bros, recorded with my boy. Rocking the red headphones this time. I'm loving it. As I said before, those are my favorite headphones in the world that aren't mine. Hopefully you can hear me very well in those. Let's get into it.
Turn them shits up, as a wise old sage once said. Thank you for listening. This is episode 65 of the Highland Park Bros podcast. For the uninitiated, Highland Park Bros is the podcast to hear. We are a weekly podcast for fans of sports, current events, and entertainment.
And as always, we are your hosts, Terrence and Jason, and every single Thursday, we come to you with a brand new episode where we discuss the current events of the day, sports, and the athletes we love.
And even some of the athletes we loved. No matter the topic, you can expect a brutally honest and fun exchange of snark while learning through the lens of our 30 years of friendship that originated in Highland Park, Illinois.
And folks, for more Highland Park Bros content, make sure you connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok under the handle Highland Park Bros or Highland Park Bros Podcast for more behind the scenes of the show and just engage with us every single day. But do not forget that the Highland Park Bros Podcast is available to listen and subscribe for free, no money, wherever you and your folks listen to podcasts.
Like us, love us, share us, follow us. And folks, if you like us, hell, why wouldn't you?
Folks, and like Terrence said a minute ago, we are the podcast to hear and watch. So make sure you're living it, loving it, and doing it.
Okay, let's get into it. All right, first segment on CPB this week is, of course, not of course. I mean, I think, Jason, you and I had discussed at what point we would feel comfortable actually covering the Highland Park shooting. Yet another mass shooting in America. And I think there's a couple of angles to approach this from. Number one, we know that our state, or, rather my state, Illinois, is going to be kind of used as a manipulation tool politically when people talk about gun violence, especially during the summer. This didn't actually, this usually we're used to people referencing Chicago. This didn't happen in the middle of the city, dude. This happened in one of the more well-off suburbs in not just Illinois, but America. And I feel like the first thing we need to disarm ourselves of is the understanding that there are no safe places in America anymore. Okay? When we as a society made the decision that 18-year-old boys need to have access to this type of power, this type of firepower, and that their parents are willing to sponsor them and license this type of violence, then all bets are off. At this point, it's a luck of the draw. So those are my initial thoughts just hearing about the Highland Park shooting. I was, of course, mortified hearing about it, a 4th of July parade. But people typically think, hey, what could possibly happen here? We're here to, I don't even care if you're like not the most patriotic person on the planet. I'm like, listen, you're out there to be sociable, to maybe watch, some local bands from the high school or the middle school, whatever, your local Boy Scouts, whatever. You're not thinking about, oh my God, this might be my last day breathing. So it's really a sad time in America, Jay. That's my initial thoughts.
Just a couple things you touched on there. Number one, I know obviously all these mass shootings are committed by males, but obviously that's not limited to males have access to this stuff. Women have access to it too, and women are arming themselves as well. But the big thing, of course, you mentioned that everyone wants to lump this in with Chicago. And obviously it's close, but it's not actually Chicago. But the main thing you mentioned is an affluent area of Highland Park, Illinois. I believe it's about 20, 25 miles-ish north of Chicago, I believe. In Lake County, I believe it is. But so I just want to point that out there, people. It's not Chicago specifically, okay? But for me, what kind of stands out, as usual, is the individual that did this. And this individual, whose last name or his name is Bobby Cremo the third, whatever, doesn't really matter. He's a piece of shit. Oh, and by the way, fair warning, anybody who listens to this, who's a regular listener of our show, usually, as you guys know, I'm not the one throwing out 4-letter words on the podcast. Usually, my co-host Terrence, who speaks very eloquently, usually all the time. But again, fair warning, I'm going to throw out some 4-letter words on this topic because, again, like I just said, this guy's a piece of shit. I don't care what his reasoning was to do this, and a whole lot hasn't really come out yet, other than he might have planned this out for weeks in advance. He has another court appearance on the 28th of this month, July, where more may come out about why he did this. But regards to the reasoning, with 7 people dead and I believe around 3 dozens more physically hurt by this, like injured by this, he's a piece of shit. Period. And I challenge anybody to push me back on that. I challenge you. I'll go ahead and dare you. But the fact of the matter is, he chose to do this. He chose to take 2 weapons, or at least one, up to the roof and fire down on people unsuspectingly, firing off 70 rounds of bullets at people. Again, winning as many people as he could, altering people's lives, hindering people's lives going forward, which I'll talk a little bit more about that at the very end of this segment. But what really kind of stood out to me is one of the details is that police said that, according to Cremo, that when he left the scene of Highland Park, he was driving towards Wisconsin. And it was said to him that he was considering doing a second shooting somewhere along the way, or either along the way or Wisconsin. That tells you right there, there's something wrong with this kid. I'm not making excuses for him. Mental health issues, folks, is not an excuse to do this. Like we mentioned last week, is another thing. Just because you have a problem with something doesn't automatically mean you're just got to be pushed to do this. I'm sure between me and Terrence both, and anybody listening to this, we know plenty of people who, quote unquote, have mental health issues. And I'm ventured to say none of them, or at least not all of them, are pushed to do stuff like this or violent acts because of it. It's not an excuse. Period. That may be me sounding insensitive. It's not. It's stating facts. Okay, folks? But those are some of my initial thoughts. Of course, then you have to also think about the victims involved, the 7 people that died, one unfortunate little boy whose life is forever changed because of this, and hoping he does continue to survive. I know he had a few issues come up recently, but those were my initial thoughts. So I'll go more into that, but I want to hear more from you. You were pretty brief in your initial thoughts, and I know
Well,
you have a lot on your mind about this. So,
I was brief about it because one, I wanted you to go, but also I'd already kind of tipped my hand, because ultimately that shootout didn't start that day. That shootout started the day his old man decided to sponsor him for this fucking gun. Okay.
what do you mean sponsor him? What do you mean?
Okay. So related to the ability for Cremo to even buy a gun, he had to be sponsored prior to purchasing the firearm.
Okay.
So it's almost like co-signing on a loan, right? And I'm sure our friend Damien will probably tell us that we don't know what the hell we're talking about, but I look forward to it because from my vantage point, Cremo's dad, Bob, is being really, if anyone's being insensitive, it's him right now because he's already been pressed on this by the media. You know, hella lawsuits are coming. The last thing anyone wants to hear out of his mouth right now is that he doesn't feel any sort of responsibility. And so that's why my initial comments were brief, because there's going to be hell to pay for this guy. His son is going to get his. They're going to prosecute him to the fullest effect of the law. It's about somebody like his father who, why is it always that these people, a lot of these mass shooters, their family is always like, we had no idea. And then you drill in a little deeper and then turns out like, oh yeah, that family crazy. There were signs something was going on with that cat years before. You ever notice that?
Yes, I have noticed that general sentiment when it comes to not verbatim the statum of I had no idea, but yeah, the general kind of consensus. Now, I do want to say that this is kind of where me and you may differ a little bit on this topic anyway, is that I don't automatically jump into any sort of putting blame or responsibility in general on parents because of this, because obviously this kid wasn't the most matured of individuals, but he's still a 21-year-old quote unquote adult, right? Capable of making his own decisions, which that may get fought in the court of law. Who knows? But so I'm not automatically the probably person that jumps on the parents and say, where were the parents at? Or blame the parents. Now, now the whole sponsoring the gun thing, like you just said, I wasn't aware of that. I know he supposedly bought the gun legally, Cremo, the boy. And I think the Illinois State Police kind of backed their decision about why they gave him the Ford card, knowing he had some issues. Supposedly, when they ran the check on him, he didn't have anything that would prevent them at that point from giving them the Ford card. So I would need to know more about this whole sponsorship part of it for me to even want to put any blame on the dad. Not saying he's not guilty of anything, or rephrase, not saying that he's not responsible of anything, or the opposite. But I just know that's not never been my type of mentality to say blame the parents. Short of we're talking about minors here, which this kid's not a minor. Now you can bring up all his upbringing, things he had to deal with his parents, and domestic violence against each other, the drinking, stuff like that, financial issues, whatever. I'm sure between me and you, a lot of kids we went to school with probably dealt with a lot of the same things. I don't see any of them mass shooting anybody. So yeah, we might differ on that a little bit, which is fine. But I do agree with you that there probably may be some issues coming the parents' way with his dad in particular. I agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jason, I was just going to call out the fact that it's Illinois state law. Young adults under 21 years of age need a parent or guardian to sponsor them in order to get the permit. So that's why the dad comes into play, because he gets, while he is, of age now, he wasn't old enough at the time to get the permit. And um that's why Bob's name's even coming up. I mean, had that little nuance there where he basically had to vouch for his son, I might be more in line with your thinking, where I'm just like, well, I don't, Jason, I feel like I by default, I don't necessarily say, oh, well, what are the parents doing? No, I always begin with the individual. I'm like, listen, your parents didn't do this. No, your parents didn't do this, but your parents sure as hell made sure conditions were ripe. At least in this case.
Yeah. One other thing I found interesting that I didn't find out till a couple days ago is that the gun that the Cremo used for the rooftop shooting actually left at the crime scene. But when officers pulled him over and finally got him stopped, and by the way, I love the pictures of them kneeling with him on the ground with his face in the concrete. That was fantastic. But they actually found another weapon in his possession, which goes along with his consideration of I'm gonna do another shooting potentially. Which, thank goodness, one, they caught him, but also thank goodness all these other towns around them canceled their fireworks festivity or parade festivities that they were doing. So many communities decided to do that, and thank goodness they did. Again, the cops stopped them, maybe short of him doing anything anyway, but still, I'm counting at least 10, 15 municipalities or what have you that stopped their stuff, because of this.
Yeah, Jason, that was a smart play, because at that point, and this is a good chunk of why we did not discuss this last week, because at the time of us discussing it, I'm like, they don't even have this guy caught. This guy's still on the run. Hell, this guy could be in your subdivision right now.
Yeah, that was definitely a sticking point for you, especially. We definitely had a hearty discussion about that. We'll say the least. But fortunately enough, he was found very quickly, considering. I think it was actually found shortly after we started talking. Um, so, but I definitely understand your position at that point that it wasn't really finalized. We easily could have talked about this last week, but knowing how we are, we decided to wait, and here we are. Um, I did mention 7 people died, which we'll mention that a little bit. Before we get into that, the punishment you brought up, he's going to be prosecuted to the fullest extent. They already announced that he's going to face 7 first degree murder charges for the 7 people that he killed. They said he's going to face additional charges just on those victims alone, in addition to ones more for the other people that he, wounded or hurt or stuff like that. And they did say that each one of these carries a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole. And he's pretty much already admitted to guilt of this. So obviously not in the court of law. So other than his defense people bring up other factors that had nothing to do with him shooting people, in my opinion, like the background, his upbringing, mental health, whatever, he's going to be in jail the rest of his life. And he's damn lucky that he doesn't live in a state that actually has the death penalty, because he would certainly get the death penalty. Illinois is not one of them. Indiana is. There's 24 states in this country that actually still currently carry the death penalty. So he's lucky he's not in the one to the very east of the state he lives in. And I'm usually not somebody who's gung-ho about the death penalty, short of cases like this when it's clear and present that you did this shit.
I feel like this is something so heinous that it's literally made you break character almost, Jason, because, it's such a disgusting act and cowardly act. And it's indescribable for someone to aspire to be this. It really is. It's, some kids, they want to grow up to be an astronaut. Some kids, they want to grow up to be a mechanic. And some kids want to grow up to be crypto magnates. In the case of this poor son of a bitch, he decided to be a terrorist, and that's all he really is. And so, in some ways, it feels like the death penalty is almost too good to him. And our, agree to disagree. I just, my thoughts, feelings with the city of Highland Park, with the victims, their families, first responders. My God, can you imagine the mass panic at that moment if you're just on a quad share and you hear gunfire? And I say it out loud because the video just gives us a glimpse into what a horrifying 10, 15 minutes that was for everybody. And to be almost a sitting duck. And so with that said, I'll toss it to you, Jay, because I feel like you had a lot to say about making sure that victims are heard. I feel like we talked enough about the scumbag, and I'm going to let you finish it out with making sure that the victims are centered and that we can move on together.
Correct. So as per usual, on our show, when we talk about things like this in general, I do want to acknowledge the victims, by at least saying their name and acknowledging them. And, so anyway, Nicholas Toledo, 78, who was apparently at the parade visiting from Mexico. Wow. Jackie Sundheim, of 63, of Highland Park. Catherine Goldstein of Highland Park. Arena McCarthy and Kevin McCarthy. I think people read this. I believe they were the parents of a 2-year-old child, and I believe the dad was shielding their son. So yeah, both are from Highland Park. They're 34 and 37. Catherine Goldstein was 64, and Jackie was 63. Stephen Strauss of 88 of Highland Park. Eduardo Uvaldo, 69, of Waukegan. So I just want to acknowledge them, of course. And obviously there's dozens more people who are injured and things like that as well. Also, as mentioned earlier, an 8-year-old boy whose name I would have to pull up. I had the article about lawsuit, so my apologies for that. But 8-year-old boy whose unfortunately spine was severed during the attacks. Was in very critical, serious condition originally, as you can imagine. Had obviously the severed spine, punctured, deflated lung, things like that. He was woken up and was upgraded to, in better condition, even to the point to where he requested to see his twin brother, his family dog, things like that. Today, unfortunately, he kind of had a little bit of a setback when it comes to issues, side issues related to some things other than those two things I mentioned. I believe it was something with a esophagus tear, I believe. But that's just one example of, like I mentioned, people whose lives, they still have them, but forever will be hindered. I have a friend who later in their life became paralyzed from the waist down due to different reasons, obviously through a car accident. And I remember seeing their face of them knowing their life would have changed for the rest of their lives. But they're an adult; they now understand what happened to them. Car accident, clearly. How do you tell an 8-year-old boy? How can an 8-year-old kid understand when he's 8, 9, 10 that I used to be able to walk, now I can't because somebody chose to shoot me, somebody that I don't know, somebody that doesn't know me, but they decided to shoot me and they just happen to, now I can't walk. As an 8-year-old, there's no way you can understand that. And probably when you're 9, you probably can't. When you're 10, who knows what age he's going to get to when he can actually kind of understand it. Because obviously this Cremo kid's going to go to a trial. 8-year-old's not going to understand none of this. They can explain to this kid why Cremo did all this stuff. 8-year-old's not going to understand it. And even 10 years from now, he still may not get it. I don't think any of us do, because most people don't. The majority of society, be it here or anywhere else in the world, they don't decide to take their problems onto a fucking roof to shoot people that they don't fucking know and have no reason to shoot them. But yet this fucking guy decided to do it. And again, we'll find out probably July 28th, potentially, a reason why. And I don't want to hear any bullshit from anybody about mental health causing to do this, whether it be his lawyer, whoever the fuck. It doesn't matter. This guy's a piece of shit. It may be determined that his dad's a piece of shit, whatever. And for anybody, and I want to say this one last thing, we can end this. The moms involved in all this stuff, as far as the Highland Park, the victims, I saw an article today that they plan on going to D.C. to march, protest, whatever, but basically try to lobby for assault weapon bans. And anybody, including Damien, whoever the fuck wants to argue with us, argue about, assault weapon bans for whatever reason you want to, I challenge you and anybody else to tell the parents of the victims or any loved ones of somebody who died or anybody whose lives are going to be affected by this, any valid reason as to why it can't happen. We just saw in Japan where somebody shot an official over there. And I know it's a different country, but I'm getting to a point. Everybody knows that Japan and probably a lot of other Asian countries don't have a gun culture. So it's pretty out of the norm for them to have this type of shooting violence at all, especially on our prime minister. The guy had to make his own damn gun. That's how much of a gun culture they don't have over there. They have to make their own shit to start killing people. And obviously, this guy didn't have an AR-15, but still, he very much had a weapon that he didn't need to have. Nobody needs a fucking AR-15 or any fucking weapon like it. So I'm holding back one to say a big F you to everybody that has an issue with this, but I'm going to refrain. I guess I basically just said it. I don't care what side of this you're on. Something has to be done. Doing nothing is just that. It's doing nothing. It's not going to change anything. And I'm done because I'm about to start flipping out. Go ahead, Terrence, take it.
That was the most non-refrain of all time. And again, we honor the victims and their families, and we know it's been a difficult, 10 days for Highland Park, and we're thinking of you guys over here at Cal Park Bros. All right. That said, this wraps up the segment on the Highland Park shooting and the victims. And coming up in the next segment, we're going to talk about Elon Musk and the Twitter buyout that never was. Coming up next on Cal Park Bros.